Welcome to Habits for Happiness, the show where we discuss habits you can employ in your daily life to make you happier. Here on Habits for Happiness today to talk about the habit of mindfulness is futurist and what, in my words, super achiever, Jamie Metzl. Welcome, Jamie.
Thank you, lady.
Thanks for being here. Well, let me introduce you first. That you've done so much. I mean, you truly are a Renaissance man and super achiever. And so Jamie is a technology futurist, an entrepreneur, and author with a secret second life as a Cacao shaman. Jamie will talk to us today about the keystone habits of mindfulness and gratitude. And the vehicle is his morning ritual of hot chocolate. I cannot wait to hear more about this. Jamie is also an extreme athlete, and he will share with us how the habit of hot chocolate can make you too happier. Jamie Metzl is a leading technology and healthcare futurist, geopolitical expert, novelist, entrepreneur, and media commentator. He's founder and chair of the global social movement OneShared.World and an Atlantic Council senior fellow and Singularity University faculty member. What you may not know is he's described by some as the original COVID-19 whistleblower. He was among the first to call for a full investigation into pandemic origins in early 2020. Jamie previously served in the U.S. National Security Council, State Department, Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and as a human rights officer for the United Nations in Cambodia, and was a member of the WHO Expert Advisory Committee as a human genome editing from 2019 to 2021. And there's so much more, but you also had a recent bestseller among of your other works called Hacking Darwin, Genetic Engineering and the Future of Humanity. So I'll let you tell us about your bio or more about you, of your robust background as we talk in the show. But first tell us, you have so much, history of what you've done. You've created so much in your life and you're so young still. And tell us what you're working on now.
So first, thank you so much, lady. Really happy to be here. And thank you for calling me a Renaissance man. And what I always say
I mean that with all the love I say it with. Please know that.
I hear you. And what I always say is during the Renaissance, like 99.999% of everyone was actually shoveling manure. So the question isn't, were you around in the Renaissance? It was what was your role in the Renaissance?
So, well, you weren't shoveling manure, but yes.
Who knows? So anyway, again, really happy to be here with you. Right now, you mentioned my work with OneShared.World, as I see it, the biggest challenge we face in the world today is this mismatch between the nature of the biggest problems in our world, like climate change and pandemics and spreading nuclear weapons and so many other things. And those problems are primarily, those big ones are common and global, but we don't have a way of addressing that entire category of problems. We have what people call a collective action problem. And so that's what OneShared.World is all about, is saying, can we do a better job of looking at the superstructure of how our world is organized? Because only then will it be possible to sufficiently address the manifestations, these problems that are so far unsolvable. And then the flip side of that is we're starting an initiative. So the problem in the world today is we have these legacy systems like the modern nation state and the United Nations that were created to solve previous problems, but they aren't sufficient for addressing the problems that we have today. And then we have another part of our world where we're just beginning to build a new world that we'll all inhabit in our future, and that's the metaverse. So we just started an initiative to organize a constitutional Congress for the metaverse, to say, well, in the beginning of this world, at the very, very beginning, what will happen if we bring together people of all different kinds of backgrounds and say, what should be the core principles that guide the development of the metaverse, so that we don't wake up 10 years from now and say, wow, the metaverse is totally controlled by corporations and our rights are limited. Let's articulate what are the principles now, and then say to our governments and to the companies and others that we as consumers, as future inhabitants of this world, these are the principles that we would like to see realized in this world. And as we move forward, we're going to measure your progress against these principles.
Yeah, it's sort of like having a global conference for values, right? What do we
Yeah.
value as human beings? And we are on this small planet, spinning around the sun. So it is important to think of us as one thing. Yeah, which brings us to mindfulness, doesn't it?
Everything comes back to mindfulness, because what is a community? What is the world? It's a bunch of individual beings, not just humans. But for us, every day is a choice. Every moment is a choice. But how can we make the best choice if we aren't aware of who we are, what we are, and where we are? And that's why mindfulness really must be the foundation for everything else.
Yeah, can I just repeat that? If we don't know who we are, where we are, and what we are, I think that's just so poignant, because it is sort of brings us back to sort of like the very basics, right? And we forget the basics, and we forget we're all human, and we forget we're all, again, like sitting on this rock, spinning around the sun. And as a result of that, things get messy.
It's so true. And we all have path dependencies. You do one thing, and then that makes it more likely you'll do a next thing, and a next step based on the first step. And that's normal, and that's just how physics works. But it's easy to get lost if we just kind of start wandering without being just very conscious about the choices that we're making and how we're living our lives, how we're treating the people around us. It's easy to get lost. It's easy to wake up a week from now, a year from now, a decade from now, and feel estranged from ourselves, and to kind of wonder, well, how, with the values that I had, let's make it 10 years ago, how did I wind up in this place that feels so far away from there? And that's why I just think having a level of awareness, having a self-consciousness, will help us at least own our lives. And that doesn't mean we're going to realize every aspiration and every dream, but at least we'll be aware of the steps we're taking and the decisions we're making along the way.
Yeah. And so for someone who may be listening and thinking to themselves, well, that sounds lovely, but like, what's the first step in awareness about myself, right?
Yeah.
What would you say?
Well, I would say the first step in awareness is just asking the question. You don't even have to get to the answer. Just every morning, every day, just to ask, like, who am I? Where am I? What do I want to achieve from this day, from this minute, from this meeting a friend for coffee, from this walk, really anything. And it's kind of a cliche, but a lot of people are writing mission statements for themselves, which is, I'm kind of torn, because it's like seeing yourself as like some corporation, and like, we're going to make the best French fries in North Dakota.
But it's very Stephen Covey, right? It's very Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, which wasn't written in this decade.
but I think it's a good idea. And whether it's written as a mission statement or it's just some reflections of who do I want to be, I think it's really important. And then again, nobody has answers to anything. I mean, this is about a process, and nobody is perfect on day one. Nobody is perfect on day N. Everybody is just striving. But I think that one is to have just a little bit of a process, and it can be structured or unstructured, just to say, well, how do I want to live my life? What's the person that I want to be? If I was looking back just before my death, much later, and I was saying, and someone says, well, how did you live your life? And you say, well, here are the principles that I lived by. I wasn't perfect, but this is what I was striving for. Like, try to answer that question now. And then every morning, just to have just a little check-in, a little reminder about your day. And this all sounds so foofy and yoga and new age and whatever. Set your intentions for the practice, and it doesn't need to be foofy, but I just think that it's so easy, and especially as our lives get complicated with kids and jobs and turtles and whatever complications people
turtles
have. Yeah, exactly.
No turtles in my house.
Okay, good. But I just felt like I would break from the mold of dogs and cats to be inclusive. But as a matter of fact, there was where did I see it? Maybe it's the New York Times. There was a thing about a woman who got married to this guy, And then her pet turtle, which was huge, was like the flower turtle. And so when they walked down the aisle, it had to be literally at turtle speed. Maybe that's why I said it. But
I mean, I just worry about it. Just to put a pin in that for a second. Yeah. I worry about, if you had a pet turtle, that someone in my house, everyone's sort of running around, with sports, and that someone would step on it.
Well, this was a
not mindfully. Okay.
Yeah, no, this was a big turtle, but yes, no, but imagine if she had not had a turtle, but like a hermit crab, then
yes, exactly. Like yes.
80% chance that would have happened.
We digress. Anyway, back to setting your intention for your day.
Yeah.
And so mindfulness.
So I would say, so for me, it's setting an intention in the day. And then at the end of the day, doing an evaluation of your day. I mean, I've kept a diary for many, many decades, and it's not, my entries every night aren't that long, but it's just kind of like looking back at the day, looking at the next day. I just think that if we don't regularly have, if we don't have a way of regularly checking in with ourselves, it's easy to kind of spin. And again, even if we do check in with ourselves, that doesn't guarantee any other outcome, but at least it guarantees that we'll have a process and a mindfulness.
Yeah. So last night, actually, I realized I do the critical 3 every morning. So for listeners, and it's just 3 things I want to get done before 10 a.m. And it's just my to-do list. I take everything in small steps, but last night I realized I hadn't done that. And I actually went back and did this practice of writing 3 things that I thought I'd done well. And it was actually just what you're saying, but it was interesting because I don't do that normally at night. And it actually was kind of like a reverse to-do list, like the 3 things I was most proud of that I did. One of them was reading with my daughter, and one of them was playing a game with my son, or whatever it was. And they were very different from like the to-dos that sort of we put on ourselves in the morning, because it is sort of a mindfulness reflection. But I just want to go back a second. During COVID, and since you were the COVID whistleblower, this sense of time, wasn't checking in with myself enough. And I don't know for listeners if anybody had this experience, but time got kind of warpy, right? Like this past 2 years has gone by, and it sort of felt like 5 minutes and 10 years at the same time. And so I think what you're saying, or I hear you saying, is that in order for us to sort of have agency of the be able to, have some timestamps in our lives, this idea of like checking in with ourselves at least gives us sort of more of a sense of the time that's passing, and that we're doing it in a way that we feel confident about and is graceful, and, we're proud of, and we're not going to have regrets when we're 90 on our rocking chairs.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think for most of us, that's what these lockdowns have done. There's like this blob of time. There weren't weekends or weeks. We were sitting in front of these computers, and we were doing it for work, and we were doing it for socializing, and we were doing it for everything. And so there was just this blob of time in the same kinds of spaces. And that's why in those kinds of contexts, having the rituals, and they don't even have to be called rituals, but just having processes, so we don't just lose track of ourselves. It's so important in daily life. And I think that for a lot of, there are some people who are in this world already, and then they have all their little, chakra things and whatever. I think
we're not speaking to them.
No, I know. most people aren't. I mean, most people are people who are just kind of waking up. They've got whatever the complications of their lives, kids, pets, jobs, and they're just lucky to feed everybody and sleep a few hours and maybe exercise if they can. And so, I think the thing of if we over fetishize what this process looks like, it ends up excluding a lot of people, because people think, well, I don't want to do kind of my morning sun salutations and chakras and have my little crystal bowls. And I think most people, it's just, so I'm not saying people have to do that. I'm just saying, just like a mindfulness. And I think it's what you're saying also, lady, just kind of like a mindfulness and a check-in, like, who am I? Who do I want to be? How do I want that sense of my best self to be manifest in my actions and over the course of my day and through my relationships? And then am I it's like the game you play when you're a little kid, when you clap your hands, getting warmer, getting colder. Am I getting warmer? Am I moving in the direction? And I think that if you if you do that, if we all do that, there's just a fighting chance that we'll own our lives a little more. Our lives will feel familiar to us. And if we don't do that, then I think there's a real risk for all of us that our lives start to feel a little bit unfamiliar. It starts to feel there's a mismatch between who we'd like to be and who we are. The where, there's so many things that we just don't control in our lives, but who we actually have a lot of influence over.
Yeah, we have no control over the external world, just the internal world, right? And
when I met with the Dalai Lama, I've met with the Dalai Lama multiple times, and I mean, it's again cliche. Dalai Lama is a cool guy, but what he said,
a very happy guy.
Oh, he was so funny because like the first time I met with him, it was a group of like 6 or 7 of us, and we met with him for an hour, and we just sat in a circle, and I was the leader of the group. It was in Dharamsala. And he'd say something, and then he'd put his hand on my shoulder, and he'd kind of lean toward me, and he'd start giggling. And then I would start giggling, and I didn't even know why I was giggling, but his happiness was so infectious.
It is,
and it was just incredible. But what he said was, and this isn't the first time your listeners will have heard it, is you should never worry because if you can influence something, why worry about it? Start working to fix it. And if you can't influence something, why worry about it? You can't influence it.
It's so simplistic, right? And this idea that we have agency over sort of our internal worlds, right? What I was saying, but not our external worlds. And to me, happiness is a frou-frou word, but meaning or purpose or agency or whatever you want to call it, to me, this idea of being relatively unbothered, which is how I define happiness, this inner feeling of contentment comes from, really cultivating your inner game and letting go of the external game, because we just can't focus on that. Go ahead.
I agree, but I definitely think we need to focus on our internal game, but I actually think that we can influence the world around us. But we just we can't put too much pressure. I mean, I told
you're an influencer.
I'm trying to shift. I mean, the task I've taken for myself is it's by definition impossible to address the global collective action problem. So it can't be fixed, certainly by me. But I do think that we can shape the external world around us. But I think that in my mind, what we shouldn't do is make our happiness contingent upon changing that other world. So I think the process of trying to make the world a better place and having successes along the way, big and small, in my mind, that's also part of the happiness equation.
That's a great point. And certainly, like, as we sort of can manage our internal world better, we have a greater effect on the external world, right? Because our energy then is such and sorted that we can then go out and create, change that we might even think is impossible, but truthfully, everything's possible as if we think it is to some degree.
Yeah, and if we come together, something that may be impossible for us individually is possible for us collectively. And that's why community is so important. But then when we're trying to say, well, what's the thing that I want to do in this world collectively? Unless you're like an authoritarian cult leader, which is a great job if you can get it. But
if you can get it.
But then what you need to do is kind of like negotiate. You have like what you're trying to achieve to realize you, but somebody else may have something that's adjacent to that. And then how do you negotiate with them so that you can together drive greater change than you would have been able to do on your own? And that's why human beings, in the Buddhist and Hindu tradition, there's a sense that the path to happiness and fulfillment is ultimately on your own. And that's the idea of you go into the forest and you reach nirvana, and it's an individual act. In the tradition that I come from, Judaism, that's not possible. The reason why I'm a Jewish atheist with Buddhist leanings, who isn't these days?
Who isn't?
Yeah, exactly. But in Judaism, there's the idea of a minyan, which traditionally it means 10 men, but it means community, that in order to fulfill some of your obligations, you can't do it alone. You need to be in a community to do some of the things like the traditional food with kosher. You can't do it on your own. You need to be in a community. And so I think that yes, there's a wonderful tradition about the happiness that can be achieved on your own, and I definitely believe in that. But there's an element of happiness that can also be best achieved in community, and I think in those two things are connected, because the more in touch we are with ourselves, I believe, the better able we are to connect with other people. Again, jargon alert, in an authentic way. And I think that's why those things are connected. And I certainly believe that if you're just about the community, it's easy to get lost in the community's identity. And if you're just about yourself, even though it can be very beautiful, I also think there's something lost.
Yeah, totally. I mean, we're social beings, right? And we definitely felt that during COVID. And even to go back, to our primal times, we are tribal beings. So our sense of belonging is important for our own survival, right? If we were cast out of the tribe, we couldn't survive, if we lived in the Sahara, for example. We don't anymore, but we're still wired that way, right?
Yep.
So brings me to the internal game of morning routine. So tell us about yours, because I think that this is a keystone part habit for happiness, is to have some semblance of quiet, or whatever it is for you. It could be 5 minutes before the world wakes up and you get, put into the blender of your day.
Yep.
And I know this is going to lead to our beautiful.
I have a lot to say on this one. So I'm going to have to give a little bit of a longer background.
Of course, you take it away.
Okay. Well, as you know, as you said in your intro, I have a morning hot chocolate ritual, but I need to give a little background. So one, just like many people, I've always loved chocolate. And just my goddaughter, who actually I'm just going to see next week in Boston. When she was graduating from high school, I went there. I went down to Boston for the graduation, and then as we were leaving, my goddaughter gave me this little bag with a gift for me, and I was kind of surprised to get a gift. And she goes, "Oh, we got this for you, and we remembered what you told us." And as I say so much shit that half of it should just be totally ignored. And I was like, "Oh my God, what did I tell you?" And then she goes, "Yeah, we remember what you told us. Milk chocolate is for losers." And so
it was only invented in the past 100 years.
Exactly. They gave me dark chocolate. So I've always loved chocolate. When I was in Berlin a number of years ago, I was giving a keynote for a tech conference called Tech Open Air, or TOA. And I was supposed to, in the first night, I was supposed to give a talk in this kind of big restaurant, but somebody had screwed up the reservation, and they thought the reservation for the room was confirmed, but it wasn't. And so I had this free night. And as part of this conference, they had a list of different things that were happening in Berlin that we could attend. I looked through it, and one of them was this thing called a sacred cacao ceremony, which I'd never heard of at that point. And I thought, well, geez, I love chocolate. I'm in Berlin. Let's go check it out. So I went there, and just when I walked in, I met this lovely woman who's now a close friend of mine, a Romanian performance artist. And so we went to this. She was on her way to this ceremony as well, and got there. And then there were these kind of like hippie guys with tattoos and long beards, and they had their cacao, they had their little crystal bowls. We sat
I'm just
down.
thinking, I'm going to interrupt you. I'm just thinking the closest cacao plant is not even like on the continent.
No, I know. That's globalization. And anyway, so we sit down, and they describe this ceremony, and we take the cacao and mindfulness and whatever. And so we sit there. They bring us these little cups with the cacao, and we drink, and it's just basically chocolate. And then they say, all right, now we're going to get up, and everyone is just going to slowly swirl in a circle. And so we did that, and I had to go because I had another event, so I wasn't able to stay for the whole thing. And so when I left, it was just a bunch of people who drank some chocolate milk and they were just slowly twirling in a circle. The next, I'd invited my new friend.
I'm laughing with you.
Yeah, no.
The twirling in the circle got me.
Exactly. No, so the next morning, I'd invited my new friend to come to this conference to hear my talk. And so the next morning I said, well, how was it? And I thought that she was going to say, oh, it was fine. We twirled in a circle, and then people recited some poems and whatever. But she said, well, here, I'm going to show you the pictures. And holy shit. I mean, it was insane. I mean, it was like all these people, almost all of their clothes were gone. They were kind of sprawled out, massaging at each other. I mean, it was just absolutely insane. I said, hold on a second. So it was chocolate milk and spinning in a circle.
This sounds like Eyes Wide Shut.
Unleashed. I mean, it's just insane. And so then at the end of the conference, in the conference, there was a cacao ceremony. That was much more of a buttoned up affair. And I stayed for the whole cacao ceremony there. And they had ingredients, like you take the cacao, you have mindfulness, there's movement and all these kinds of things. So when I came back to the United States, I thought, one, how cool, a sacred cacao ceremony. I want to do more. Two, I'd like to lead these ceremonies. And then three, I think I can do a much better job than even these people in Berlin. So that was the goal I set for myself. So I thought, well, how do I get accredited as a cacao shaman? And believe it or not, there is no official accreditation authority for the cacao shaman, for cacao shamanism. So you want to be a cacao shamanism?
Yeah, this is an open opportunity, listeners.
Hang out a shingle. And so I trained, and then I started doing it. Like when I'd get invited to speak at tech conferences. I've become actually the official cacao shaman of Singularity University Exponential Medicine. And when I'd get invited to speak at tech conferences, I'd say, well, I'll give your keynote, but I also want to do a cacao ceremony at the end of the night. And people just love it. And the theme of the ceremony it's just mindfulness. I mean, what I always say, you've come to a sacred cacao ceremony. There's no such thing as sacred cacao. There are no sacred plants. There are no sacred animals. There are no sacred mountains. There are no sacred people, because nothing in the world is sacred unless we believe it's sacred.
Yeah, and unless we attach meaning to it, right? Exactly. Like ayahuasca or turtles.
Yeah, exactly. And but if we attach meaning to it, then everything is sacred. So it's not like you kind of live your life and everything is sacred except for the magic sacred mountain and the magic sacred.
But what a beautiful way to live your life, that everything is sacred.
Everything is sacred. And I said, but then we have, just for cultural and historic reasons, just different things that are shortcuts for us, just because other people have treated them that way. So if everybody thinks a mountain is sacred, and we kind of say, well, I'm going to allow this mountain to be sacred also for me, it makes it a little bit special. If we say, all right, but for me, this other mountain is sacred, well, that becomes our sacred mountain. It's not about the mountain, it's about you. And and then with these ceremonies, my belief is you don't need the ayahuasca, you don't need the psilocybin, you don't need the alcohol. Everything whatever you want from those substances is available in you if you just get out of your own way. And I think that
ding. You should join my coaching business.
Okay, good.
Everyone's like, should I do psilocybin? I'm like, well, you can do a shortcut, but there's also, it's a beautiful entryway into, there's no judgment. I mean, these things are beautiful for people, but all of this work, because I've done this work and I believe in this work, is internal work that can be done through meditation and mindfulness and visualization. We can get where we want to go. We have the tools. We just aren't using them. They're like atrophied muscles, if you will.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And in my ceremonies, people are just so liberated. Like I did one here in New York at Soho House, and people were so into it that the waiters, the bartenders, everybody who was there in this big hall, they all dropped their stuff and just join the ceremony, dancing around with.
Did they take their clothes off?
Yeah, mine are more tame.
But I'm going to just stop you for a second, because Jamie, we have to go to break. But when we come back, we'll hear about the Soho House ceremony, as well as the power of the ceremony, and how you too can find meaning in your life through a habit of mindfulness. So hang on, everyone. Be right back. We're back. Thanks everyone for hanging in there. We're here with Jamie Metzl, talking about the power of mindfulness through a cacao ceremony. So here, tell us about, for people that may have been not listening before the break, I just wanted to introduce Jamie as a futurist, serial superhuman. And also he's a chocolate shaman. He has a secret life as one. And he's telling us about how we can achieve a level of mindfulness through a chocolate ceremony or other ceremony of our choice. So here, take it away, Jamie.
Thanks so much, lady. Anyway, so I was talking before the break about my experiences in Berlin and the ceremonies that I do, but now I'll just talk about what I do every morning and how every single person can do the same sort of thing. And I'll give just one small example on something else that I think is relevant here. Years ago in New York, I went to a meditation training at the Japan Society, which is here on the east side near the UN. And they had this great Zen master, and everybody was there and meditating. But the person somewhere around me, it was a little packed pre-pandemic, had left their phone on. And so while we were in this meditation, I'd hear this ding, ding. And it was like, literally, I'd try to meditate and then it'd be ding. And so then it was just bugging me. And so I started trying to figure out who it was, and I'd tap somebody on the shoulder, and this is while everybody's, and I was saying is that your phone? And then everybody had this same thing. It's like, who the F are you bothering me during meditation? But because I'm in a Zen meditation, I can't act like I'm really pissed off. I have to act like I'm kind of.
You could just do the Dalai Lama and just start laughing hysterically.
Above it all. And so at the end, it was just, and I mean, it was kind of ironic. And then at the end, I went to after the thing happened, after the meditation, I went to the Zen master, and I said, look, I was trying to meditate, but somebody's phone was on. And they said, well, that's part of the meditation. And what you can do, even if you don't have time to meditate, is just every time you hear a ding, think of that. It's like a gong in a meditation. And this person said, I have people who, when they go up the elevator, every time the little bell rings for each floor, that's like a reminder to them to kind of center themselves. And so equivalent to that is, for me, my just little morning ritual. I do it every morning. And because with the pandemic, I mean, it's changing now, has created kind of a greater continuity of what our days look like than in the previous life. So every morning when I'm here in New York, I have the same thing. I have my whole recipe for it's a multi-stage recipe. I can send it to you after if you want. I posted it on Twitter. But yes. I will. For my making my hot chocolate, it takes like 45 minutes. That doesn't mean I'm working for 45 minutes, but once you get the main stuff just simmering and stirring.
I have to put a side note here. I met a mutual friend of Jamie's recently. I was traveling in Mexico, and he said Jamie they stayed together, and Jamie would wake up, and he said it took an hour and a half.
Yeah. Well, the longer it takes, the better it is.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's true. And anyway, and so it's just that ceremony for me. It's kind of grounding, and but everybody has something that you do in the morning, and it doesn't even have to be a drink. It doesn't even have to be food related. It could be anything. It could be changing your baby's diaper. I mean, it literally could be anything, but just to have some kind of built-in structures to remind us just to pay attention. And I think that's what these rituals are for. And you don't even have to call them rituals. It's just reminders. So for me, I really like this cacao ceremony, and over the years, it just gets more and more elaborate, but it doesn't have to be that. It could be they're hugging your partner every morning before you get out of bed, telling your child you love them, telling yourself you love yourself. I mean, just little kinds of things. But it's nice to have nice things become habits, because, and frankly, when something becomes a habit, it takes less mental energy to do it.
That's why we have habits,
yeah.
right? Because they become like automatic software, you know?
Yeah. No, so my girlfriend in India, and she's, that sounds like something from Avenue Q, but she's there now, Malika, and
she's lovely. Yes.
Yeah, I know, you better.
Yes.
And so her grandmother is 94, and they live together. And then they have a thing called an arti, which they do every night, which is saying the Hindu prayers. And then they're just these little bells. And while her grandmother says the prayers, Malika, when she's home, just rings these bells. And even her grandmother, who's 94, who's in, obviously very few people are as sharp when they're 94 as younger in life. But because she's been doing this her whole life, it's just kind of rote. It's like a check-in, and every tradition has that, whether it's the Muslims praying to Mecca but you don't have to be part of an organized religion to do this. It can just be every morning when I'm getting a drink of water, before I take my first sip, I pause for a second and have gratitude. And that's with Judaism. There's a thing of the kind of saying prayers for everything, which practicing Orthodox Jews do, like before water and food. And it's just a practice of mindfulness, and even practice of mindfulness sounds like exclusionary language. It's just awareness. It's like we have a tendency to sleepwalk through our lives, and then you wake up and it's like, wow, that day happened, or that week happened.
Yeah. That's back to this idea of like squishy time, right? That COVID that brought to us, but also not having our lives turn out to be this blob of time, right? Because I could see, I've never had that experience until recently, that COVID was this sort of block of 2 years that just, I can't really get my arms around it the way I can other years, right? And it's a little bit scary to think that, 30 years could go by in my future or someone's future, and then you could look back on it and it could be that way. We want to have these, even this idea of like ringing the bells at night, which is such a beautiful story. It does almost like ground us into the place that we are. So it's about coming back, which sounds very woo-woo too, to the present moment and just noticing what's around you. I love that so much. So if someone wants to know more about cacao and or sort of this process of chocolate, where would they start?
Well, so for cacao, unfortunately, you have to just do your own research. And I'm happy to, because I wish there was one thing. Like if somebody said, well, I want to start a cacao practice, it's like, well, I don't know. But what I will say is I'm going to share with you, lady, my recipe, and don't do it because it's like, this is some kind of mystical recipe for having a cacao ceremony. Just do it because you love hot chocolate. And you think it would make you happy to have it every morning. And please exercise. Hot chocolate is not the healthiest of things. It's the happiest of drinks, not the healthiest of
yes, my kids would argue with you, but I do have to say, let me just tell you, I went to Costa Rica a couple of years ago and was alone with my kids, and we were in the jungle staying in these like huts, in the trees. And we actually had someone come down and do a cacao, not ceremony, but showed us, we took the plant and we went from the plant, and my kids like ground, the beans, and then we went and did the whole thing. So I drank some cacao, and then I was awake, it was at night, and then I was awake till like 2 a.m. So one of the things that I did when I got back from that trip was I went to the grocery store and I looked for cacao in that form so that I could replace my actually coffee with it, because it did, even though I was awake all night, I did notice I didn't have, if I drink too much coffee, which other people may experience, after like cup number 2, I start to actually feel kind of tired. And the cacao really kept me up at very smoothly. So I was like, this could replace that. So I couldn't find it. So I sort of dropped the idea, and then you showed up back in my life. So, so is it something that for people meant to be, could you replace a coffee habit? And so does it for people that might be wondering this, oh, it's a kid's hot chocolate. We're not talking about kids hot chocolate,
Well,
right?
we are and we aren't. I mean, the
Okay.
dirty little secret. I mean, definitely cacao. It's very healthy. It does have some stimulant effect if you take it in a high enough dose. Is the upside. The downside is that raw cacao tastes like shit, unfortunately. Which is why the chocolate has been developed, which takes that raw ingredient.
Yeah, and the British just put refined sugar in it and called it chocolate.
The cocoa butter and the sugar and all those kinds of things. So definitely, if you're unhappy with coffee, and some people love coffee, and lots of people have a morning coffee ritual, and like I said, because nothing and everything is sacred, the coffee bean is as sacred as a cacao bean. But I get more happiness out of. So if you want to do raw cacao and you can find some way of preparing it that tastes good for you, it's a great thing. And what I will say on the caffeine, years ago when I was working at the White House for President Clinton, the hours were insane. I was chronically tired. And I thought, well, maybe I should become a coffee drinker, which I wasn't then and I'm not now. And so I did a lot of research. What would happen if I started having a morning cup of coffee like most every other person on planet Earth? And what I realized was that for the first 3 or 4 months, I'd have tons more energy. But then over time, I would need the coffee to get to my previous baseline, because then you just become dependent upon the coffee. So now
it's like alcohol.
Yeah. So I do have, I don't have coffee every day, but I do have coffee when I need it, like because I haven't slept or because I have some big thing I need to do. And so I take coffee, I have a cup of coffee maybe once a week, and I get all of the benefits, but I don't have the dependence on coffee. So long way of answering your question. If people want to have cacao, it's a great morning drink. I like dark chocolate, which again, it has health benefits. But I love, it just makes me happy. And
does it keep you awake though? I mean, that's what I mean. Does it have a caffeine?
A little bit. I guess I'll send you again when we're off.
Yeah,
I'll send you my recipe. But it's not. I mean, definitely it's sugar and some chocolate in the morning definitely gives you a jolt. But it's not like as much as an espresso. I mean, if your goal is chasing a caffeine hit, you're better off maybe with coffee. If your goal is a continuous caffeine, I think matcha is probably great for that. And like when I was in Kyoto in Japan, and I have a friend who's a monk in one of the monasteries there, and they all take matcha, and they have a ritual with the matcha, how they do it with the brush that they use. And again, same point, everything is or isn't sacred.
Yeah, I love that idea.
It's sacred if you ascribe sacredness to it. And so it doesn't have to be a caffeine drink. Like I said, it could be water. You could have a sacred water. It doesn't have to be a ceremony process. Like every morning before you drink a water, you pause for 5 seconds and just have a moment of gratitude, or a moment of just saying, all right, I'm going to stop. I'm going to focus on how do I want to live my day. And I think with all of these drinks, like with water, you could just think, well, where does this water come from? I mean, it comes from precipitation in the sky, and where has this water been? I mean, it's just like, wow,
I love that.
Any awareness, and I do this in my cacao ceremonies, but where does this cacao come from? And just imagine the person who planted the seed, who watered the seed, who harvested the bean, who ground it, who flew the plane that brought the beans from Costa Rica or Ecuador or wherever to the United States. It's just like any awareness of anything realizes how interconnected we all are.
Yeah, no, I have the chills. That's amazing. And it just like brings up this idea of like curiosity as a wonderful grounding tool, right, for us, because it brings us back to the present moment. And, you had said earlier that a lot of us we feel sort of disconnected from ourselves, right? And especially during maybe pandemic time. And, most people come to me as a coach because they feel homesick for themselves. So I think that it's really poignant in the fact that we all, sometimes lose our own identity in some way because we're rushing through our day. And so the idea that even in the morning, whatever ritual that someone would like to pick up, whether it be a cacao ceremony or something else, gives us space, right, to ground ourselves and take a little bit of inventory about what's happening around us, or having some curiosity about what's coming around us, so we can come back to ourselves, so we can have a day in which we're sort of proactive and not reactive, right? That's the sort of idea. And if we set the tone for our day, then we can set the tone for our life and not have squishy time. So if people want,
hold on one second before you, that's a beautiful point you made, and I wanted to make sure it's not lost. I mean, the idea of people being homesick for themselves, I think it's so important. It's so easy for all of us to get lost, to get alienated from what we believe is ourselves. And to find yourself, it doesn't have to be all at once. It can just be a bunch of little steps, of little pieces of awareness, because wherever you go, there you are. And whatever you want to be and whatever you feel you are, you just have to start stepping in that direction. And it doesn't have to be, and it's scary for people because often where we are now and where we'd like to be are just separated by such a gulf. But just a little step, one step and then another step, that's the way to get there.
Yeah, baby steps still make you go forward, right? Is this idea. I had a client actually this week who was talking to, and she was saying she's goal fatigued because the Q1, right? Everybody's talking about their goals and they're setting goals for work and personal and with their trainer or whatever it is. And it can be exhausting, right? And I said, let's ditch the goals and let's just make a chart that every day you can check that you're just moving forward. And that could be 5 minutes working on. It could be doing 5, push-ups for 5 minutes. It could be working on work for, however long, but momentum still moves us forward. And it doesn't have to be measured so quantitatively all the time.
Yeah, and people are really harsh on themselves because you kind of set a goal.
That's a whole nother topic.
No.
Yes,
it's like you set a goal and then you're not making, when you set it, you're intending to do it, and then you don't do it. And then you feel, well, you haven't reached my goal. And then you think, well, I suck because I'm not making progress towards it. So it almost like the setting of the goal makes you worse off than when you didn't even have a goal. And I think people just need to take it a little easy on themselves, and just a little bit, a little bit of awareness, a little bit of mindfulness. What's an extra inch that you can make moving in the direction of where you want to go, and an extra outreach to a person you love, doing something nice for yourself, just little by little, I think
little by little. Oh, I love that. So Jamie, obviously we could talk for hours, but towards the end of our show, tell us how people can find more of you if they want you to be the shaman at their latest cacao ceremony, or if they want you to speak on world relations, or maybe on something like hacking Darwin. How can people find more of you?
That's so sweet. Yeah. So if you want me to officiate your wedding,
with some cacao and turtles.
Exactly. No, so if people want to find, I do give a lot of keynote talks for big high profile events. But I would love for people, the easiest way to find me is through my website, jamiemetzl.com. You can sign up for my newsletter. There you can also go to the OneShared.World website. We have people from 120 countries working together with the goal of trying to build a better future through addressing the global collective action problem. You can sign the pledge of interdependence. It's connected to what we've been talking about today, to join us or to volunteer. And you can find me on Twitter at Jamie Metzl, JamieMetzl.
Love that. And also I will share the chocolate recipe that Jamie's going to share
Mm.
with me on the Facebook group at Habits for Happiness. And, please reach out to me. Please reach out to Jamie. This idea of OneShared.World is so amazing. Please look for Hacking Darwin in a bookstore near you. And we could, again, talk for hours. This is so amazing. And you're just such a super achiever and a force in the world. We're lucky to have you in our small planet
Well, you
advocating
too,
for
to
all
say.
of us. So remember, everybody, the road to happiness is paved with healthy habits. And please listen next week for another riveting conversation on a powerful habit that can change your life. Bye, everyone.